So I showed up at Princeton as a graduate student in 1968. I had the longest hair in the class. Everyone had told me, this is the best graduate school in mathematics, that if you really want to do research, this is the place to go. Like many American students, I didn't know what I was interested in. I certainly didn't know who the people were that made this a great place. And of course, probably at the time I was applying, you weren't even on the faculty. Because they took very few students, it was just assumed that graduate students were worth talking to. And so people were very open. There was an assumption you could quickly move to research level, get out in 3 years. At Princeton, it really was rather different, and certainly there was a spectacular set of people there. Some of whom, like Herb, had come from Berkeley. Wilfred, I guess, was at Columbia by that point. Right. There were some people up in New York who would come down. Eric Friedlander was an instructor. Jim Arthur in number theory was an instructor there. I think Jim Carlson was the year ahead of me. What was it like for you as an atmosphere?
I loved Princeton, and I still do. I think one of the things that was going on at Princeton that happened while I was a graduate student, and then was again very much part of the mathematical atmosphere that I should have mentioned earlier, was in complex analysis. Hugo and Gunning had written a book, and Joe Cohn had done the D-bar problem, which was formulated by Don Spencer, and Joe solved it, and that was, as decisive event in several complex variables as there has ever been. And that was part of the mathematical atmosphere at the time. And, certainly stuff I did was very much influenced by that point of view, as well as the Chern more geometric side of things.
Then you instituted something called the Nothing Seminar.
I inherited that from Don. He used to run the Nothing Seminar.
So maybe you could describe the general principles of the Nothing Seminar.
It was a seminar where it was unstructured. There would be some topic that we would be working on, but it was certainly not a formal event. And I think students, postdocs, there weren't many at that time, but faculty members were all sort of one and the same as participants in the Nothing Seminar. It was held in Fine Hall. At that time, it had moved to the new Fine Hall, I guess, and always followed by a sort of potluck dinner afterward, and jugs of cheap wine. I think when Don did it, they may have had martinis also, which I learned from him.
Usually we would break out the wine at some point during the seminar, and then, by this point, the Italians had arrived. Maurizio and Giulia were there, Maurizio Canalba, and Enrico Arborello. I think he was there at that point.
He was at Columbia as a student.
Right. That's right. He was a student of Herb, right. And I think that also occasionally improved the quality of the wine.
I think the tone of it, in a way, is illustrated by stories Spencer used to tell about Lefschetz. One of them that Spencer told me about was that Lefschetz was lecturing on Lefschetz theory and algebraic geometry. This was after the war, and there were several people from Europe who were there in the lectures. And at a certain point, he was giving an argument for a theorem, and somebody raised their hand and objected and said, "Well, what about this detail and what about that detail?" And Lefschetz sort of looked at him and said, "Come on, we're not babies, are we?" It was certainly the opposite of Bourbaki, and it has its advantages but also disadvantages.
in Paris that being quick was very important, and certainly in your circle that wasn't the case. I mean, it was more, you know, what you could do after you thought about something for a while.
One of my students actually told me, not you, at some point, that one of the things they appreciated about having me in as an advisor was they think, well, if this guy can do mathematics, so can I.